I've watched that hallway camera footage 13 times. Three teenagers shared the same cabin, yet only one of them was seen going in and out. So where did the other two disappear into the night? Anna left the dinner table because her braces hurt. But why did her family tell a different story? Why did no one report her missing for an entire night? And who pushed her remains under the bed, wrapping it in a blanket and covering it with a life jacket, as if trying to hide something far darker? In Anna's final 48 hours, every detail feels like a lie stitched into the shadows, and when you piece them together, the most terrifying part is what's not being said. Last 48 hours. On November 2nd, under the warm Miami sun, the Carnival Horizon slowly pulled away from the port. For thousands of passengers, it was the beginning of a dream vacation. But for one family on board, and for an 18-year-old girl named Anna, it would become something else entirely, a timeline of unanswered questions, contradictions, and ultimately, tragedy. Anna was the kind of teenager people noticed instantly, a cheerleader, bright, athletic, endlessly energetic. The type of girl who posted sunsets on Instagram and talked about college plans. She boarded the ship with the same excitement any 18-year-old would feel, packing swimsuits, taking photos on the deck, and joking with her siblings about who would get seasick first. But beneath the surface of this family vacation, tensions were already simmering, tensions that would only become obvious after everything fell apart. Traveling with Anna were her father, her stepmother, her stepbrother, and her grandparents. A multi-generation family trip. Smiles in the photos. Matching lanyards. A trip they said was meant to bring everyone closer. And maybe that's what it looked like, at least from the outside. As the ship cut through the ocean, passengers around them enjoyed the buffet, the music, the lights. But something about those first hours feels chilling when we look back now. Because this is the last confirmed period of normalcy in Anna's life. The last time anyone could say for certain where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing. What happened next would fracture the narrative completely. In most cruise ship disappearances or deaths, the beginning is predictable: someone missing at dinner, someone not returning to their cabin. But in Anna's case, there was no gradual buildup, no signs of danger, no frantic search parties. Instead, there was a sudden, brutal announcement: Anna had been found dead, inside the very cabin she shared with her teenage stepbrother. And so the questions begin. How does a joyful family trip turn into a homicide investigation? Why did the adults in the group give conflicting accounts of those early hours? And most disturbing of all, how does an 18-year-old girl end up dead on a cruise ship, while the only people around her insist they don't remember? What happened? The Carnival Horizon left Miami with laughter. But by the time it returned, all that remained was silence, and a story that still has no ending. November 6th, just one day before everything would collapse. The family sat together for dinner, one of those ordinary cruise ship meals where nothing feels out of place. According to the adults, this was when Anna began not feeling well. They said she complained about her braces hurting, that she excused herself early because of discomfort. On the surface, it sounds believable. Minor pain, teenage fatigue, a long day under the sun. But this is also the first fracture in the story. Because while the family insisted Anna left dinner sick, weak, and unable to continue the evening, the ship's surveillance cameras told a very different version of events. Footage captured Anna later that night walking into the casino, alone, calm, and appearing entirely normal. Not only was she not sick, she was smiling, engaging, active. There was no sign of pain, no hunched posture, no discomfort touching her mouth. She moved like someone enjoying the night, not like someone who had supposedly left the table because she was too unwell to stay. And that leaves us with a question that sits uncomfortably at the center of this timeline. Why would her family describe her as unwell when the evidence shows the opposite? Was it a misunderstanding, a lapse in memory? Or was it the first attempt, intentional or not, to create a narrative that would later protect someone? Because when a homicide occurs in a confined space like a cruise ship, timing matters. Behavior matters. And the way a victim spends their final hours becomes crucial to investigators. So why did the people closest to Anna describe her as weak, tired, and sick, while cameras show her upbeat and completely functional? And it doesn't stop there. The family's portrayal of that night shifted in later interviews. Some claimed Anna went to bed early. Others said she was lying down. And one even suggested she had taken medicine. None of these details appear in the footage. None align with the girl walking confidently into a casino just hours before her death. If she wasn't sick, then the entire foundation of their version begins to crumble. And if they weren't telling the truth about something as simple as how she felt during dinner, what else were they willing to hide? In investigations like this, the smallest lies often point to the biggest secrets. The hallway is quiet, too quiet for a ship carrying thousands of people. At 11:42 p.m., the CCTV camera at the end of Deck 9 flickers, slightly infrared lens casting a pale glow across the carpeted corridor. And then, from the left side of the frame, Anna appears. She isn't rushing. She isn't stumbling. Her steps are steady, deliberate, almost peaceful. The soft hum of the ship blends into the background as fluorescent ceiling lights reflect faintly off the metal handrails. Every detail feels painfully normal, except for what we now know is coming. Anna walks past the first cabin, then the second. She briefly adjusts her hair, as if preparing to settle in for the night. Nothing about her posture suggests distress. No one follows behind her. No one approaches from the opposite end. It is a moment frozen in time, ordinary, unremarkable, and yet the last recorded evidence of her alive. At 11:44 p.m., she reaches her cabin door. She looks down, taps her keycard, and steps inside. The door closes softly behind her, and just like that, the hallway falls still again. From this point forward, no witness, no camera, and no passenger would ever see Anna alive. The corridor kept the truth, but it never spoke. Between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., the Carnival Horizon becomes a different world. The hallways are empty. The casino quiets down. Families return to their cabins, doors click shut, and a strange stillness settles over the ship. It's in this silence, this 5-hour void with no witnesses, that everything happened. After Anna stepped into her cabin at 11:44 p.m., the timeline simply breaks. No one checked on her. No one reported unusual noises. No staff member passed by. For 5 hours, the cabin where Anna slept, or tried to sleep, became a sealed box, a place untouched by cameras, protected by darkness and hidden by a closed door. Investigators often say that crimes don't happen in chaos, they happen in opportunity. And here, opportunity stretched across the entire night. Why did no adult check on Anna, knowing she supposedly wasn't feeling well? Why did no one notice movement, or the lack of it? And how does a young woman go from healthy at dinner to dead before sunrise without a single alert, scream, or witness? This is the window where the truth lives, somewhere between the quiet hours, the locked cabin door, and the stories that refuse to match. 5 hours. No witnesses. This is where the homicide occurred. Morning on a cruise ship is usually loud, doors opening, kids running to breakfast, announcements echoing through the halls. But on November 7th, the morning that should have begun like any other, something was noticeably wrong. Not because of noise, but because of silence. Anna was 18 years old. Healthy. Active. A cheerleader who rarely slept in. And yet, this morning, no one in her family checked on her. Not her stepmother. Not her grandparents, who were supposedly sharing the same vacation space just doors away. Hours passed. Breakfast passed. The morning activities began. And still, no one knocked on Anna's cabin door. No one asked the crew for help. No one reported her missing. No one expressed concern that she hadn't come out, hadn't eaten, hadn't texted. This silence becomes even more unsettling when paired with their earlier claims. The family said Anna wasn't feeling well, that she had left dinner because of pain, fatigue, sickness. So, why didn't the adults check on a sick teenager the next morning? Unless Anna not showing up wasn't surprising to them. Unless someone already knew why she wasn't coming out. In missing person cases, the first hours are everything. Parents panic over a child being 20 minutes late. Friends raise alarms when texts go unread. But here, Anna was absent for hours, and the reaction wasn't panic. It was nothing. Investigators quietly noted this as one of the earliest and most troubling red flags. The lack of urgency. The lack of urgency. The absence of even the smallest attempt to verify her safety. It raises uncomfortable possibilities. Was this silence simply negligence? A family assuming she was sleeping in? Or was it something far darker, a coordinated quiet? The kind that appears when someone already knows what they're going to find behind that cabin door. Because when crew members finally entered the cabin, when the truth finally surfaced, when Anna's body was discovered, lifeless, bruised, and naked, the family's earlier silence transformed from strange into suspicion. People who fear something might be wrong usually rush to seek help. People who know something is wrong often don't. And on the morning of November 7th, the family's silence was speaking louder than any scream ever could. At 11:17 a.m., a cabin attendant unlocked the door to clean. It was supposed to be routine: replace towels, make beds, restock water. But the second he stepped inside, he sensed something was wrong. The air felt still, heavy. One bed remained unmade. A blanket lay crumpled on the floor. And there, on the far side of the room, the life jacket, bright orange, was strangely placed next to the bed, as if intentionally covering something. He knelt down to pick it up. And that was when he saw it. Pressed into the narrow shadow beneath the bed was the remains of an 18-year-old girl, Anna. To the attendant, it looked almost staged, as if someone had tried to hide her but didn't know how, or simply didn't care enough to finish the attempt. Her hair was matted, her lips slightly parted, and faint discoloration had begun forming. Details that officers would later describe carefully. Clinically: bruising, compression marks, signs of struggle. The attendant froze. For a full second, he couldn't move. His hands shook. Cruise ship staff are for medical emergencies, drunken injuries, even accidental falls, but not this. Not a teenager's undressed remains hidden under a bed. When his voice finally returned, it came out as a gasp. He scrambled back into the hallway, yelling for help, calling for his supervisor, his radio dropping against the doorframe. Other staff rushed over, looked inside, and immediately backed away, some covering their mouths, others whispering to each other in shock. Word spread fast among the crew: someone didn't wake up. But that was the sanitized version. The truth was far worse. Security was alerted first, then the medical team. They entered quietly, methodically, documenting every detail of the cabin. The life jacket covering part of her remains. The blanket wrapped around her. The position, wedged where no one would naturally end up. The absence of clothing. And the bruising. To investigators, scenes like this aren't random. They tell a story, one the killer never meant to tell. Covering a victim is often seen in cases involving guilt or panic. Pushing a bed reflects concealment, an attempt to buy time, delay discovery, or avoid being caught inside the room. One chilling detail stood out: the cabin had two occupants. One of them was Anna. The other was her teenage stepbrother. And yet, according to the family, he didn't remember anything. A statement that only deepened suspicion once the condition and placement of Anna were revealed. By the time authorities secured the cabin, the morning chaos of the ship had faded into an eerie quiet. Passengers continued eating lunch, sunbathing, laughing, never knowing that just a few decks below, a homicide scene was being sealed off. At 11:17 a.m., the truth finally surfaced. But justice, whatever form it might take, was still nowhere in sight. The room 2445. When investigators stepped into the cabin, one fact became immediately clear: this was a closed-room crime scene. There were no signs of forced entry, no damaged lock, no bent metal, no pry marks on the door. Cruise ship cabins are built like hotel rooms: on water, secure, monitored, trackable. Every entry is logged, every keycard recorded. And on the night Anna died, no unknown keycard ever accessed the room. That meant only one thing: whoever harmed Anna didn't come from the outside. Inside the small cabin, nothing suggested a stranger had slipped in unnoticed. There was no chaotic struggle spilling into the hallway, no overturned furniture suggesting an intruder, no missing belongings consistent with a robbery. Everything pointed inward, toward the people who already had access. Cabins on cruise ships are intimate spaces. The doors lock automatically. The walls are thin. Anyone entering would have been heard by nearby passengers. But no one heard anything. No one reported unusual sounds. No one saw anyone suspicious approaching that door. So investigators were left with the unsettling reality: whatever happened to Anna happened between the walls of that cabin, behind a door that only she and her stepbrother could open. A closed room, a locked door, and a truth someone inside didn't want the world to know. When investigators found Anna under the bed, wrapped in a blanket and partially covered by a life jacket, they immediately recognized a pattern, one seen in countless homicide cases, where the perpetrator is young, panicked, or intimately connected to the victim. Hiding remains is never random. It's not something that happens during an accident. It requires movement, intention, and time. Psychologically, covering or hiding a victim often reflects shame, guilt, or fear of consequences. Offenders, especially juveniles, frequently attempt crude concealment, hoping to delay discovery or create the illusion that nothing happened. It isn't sophisticated. It isn't planned. But it is purposeful. And we've seen this before. In the John Benet Ramsey case, she was placed in a basement room, deliberately positioned, partially covered, suggesting familiarity, not a stranger breaking in. In the Meredith Kircher homicide in Italy, she was similarly covered with a duvet, an act that investigators described as emotional distancing by someone who knew her. In Harmony Montgomery's case, concealment and delayed reporting were red flags pointing to deliberate harm rather than tragic accident. Anna's case mirrors these patterns with chilling clarity. To physically push an 18-year-old girl under a cruise ship bed requires effort, awareness, and intent. A person would need to lift, drag, position, and cover her. None of that aligns with any scenario involving an accidental medical sojourn or sudden collapse. No one accidentally hides themselves. This was an act of post-offense behavior, an attempt, however clumsy, to erase evidence, to buy time, to avoid facing what had just occurred. And for investigators, this single detail eliminated almost every innocent explanation. A remains hidden is a message. Someone knew exactly what happened to Anna. And someone didn't want her to be found. When investigators examined the scene, one detail stood out more than anything else: the life jacket. Bright orange. Bulky. Completely out of place. Someone had taken it from the emergency cabinet and placed it over Anna, alongside the blanket wrapped around her. And in the world of homicide investigations, the item used to cover a victim is often more telling than the act itself. The life jacket was the closest, quickest object available. That alone suggests panic, not planning. Whoever covered Anna wasn't thinking clearly. They weren't staging a story or creating a scene meant to mislead. They simply grabbed what was within arm's reach, an impulsive, frantic attempt to hide what they had done. But the object chosen also reveals intent. A life jacket is rigid, structured, wide enough to obscure specific parts of the remains. It could hide certain indicators on the remains that might suggest something more than a medical emergency. This wasn't a sheet draped gently out of guilt or remorse. It was an object placed with purpose, to conceal, not to comfort. Forensic teams paid close attention to this. Not the jacket itself, but what clung to it. Cruise ship blankets shed fibers. Life jackets have rough webbing, Velcro patches, nylon straps. When pressed against a victim's skin, or dragged across it, these materials can transfer microfibers, hair strands, skin cells, and DNA. In many closed-room homicides, it's these tiny traces that revealed the remains, who moved it, and in what order events happened. If the blanket and life jacket bear fibers from different surfaces, or fingerprints from only one person, it can reconstruct the entire post-crime sequence. One uncomfortable truth becomes unavoidable: a person X doesn't cover a remains unless they know they're responsible for what happened. The life jacket wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. It was a desperate, sloppy attempt to hide the visible evidence, and a silent clue pointing straight back to the person who placed it there. When investigators found Anna, one detail overshadowed everything else: she wasn't wearing any clothes. And immediately, the questions multiplied. Where were her clothes? Were they folded somewhere, thrown aside, hidden, or were they removed by someone else? Cruise ship cabins are small, controlled environments. There are only a few places clothing could be: inside the closet, in the bathroom, beside the bed, in the trash, or concealed intentionally. Yet none of this has been publicly explained. Authorities have not released what they found, or didn't find, inside that cabin. And that silence creates one of the most significant gaps in the case. Because clothing tells a story. If her clothes were intact, it suggests one type of scenario. If they were torn, stretched, or damaged, it suggests another. If they were missing entirely, it raises questions that investigators are undoubtedly considering but not yet sharing. And the most unsettling question remains: did Anna remove them herself, or did someone else? In many closed, space investigations, the condition and location of a victim's clothing become essential pieces of the timeline. They reveal movement, struggle, and intent. They can also carry microscopic evidence: fibers, hair, fingerprints, that can identify exactly who handled them. But here, the public has heard nothing. This absence of information is not accidental. When investigators withhold details this critical, it typically means they are protecting the integrity of the case, or the evidence is so sensitive that releasing it could compromise future charges. What happened to Anna's clothes may be the key to the entire truth. Until that detail is disclosed, one of the case's biggest questions remains hanging in the dark. What was taken from Anna that night? And why is no one talking about it? When investigators examined Anna's remains, one detail immediately shaped the direction of the case: the markings on her neck. These were not random, and they were not subtle. Even without releasing specifics, officials confirmed enough for experts to understand that some form of pressure had been applied. In forensic analysis, the pattern and orientation of neck markings often reveal more than any witness statement. They can suggest the direction of force, the dominant hand of the person applying it, or whether the pressure came from an object rather than a bare hand. Investigators look at angles, spacing, and depth, but in this case, none of that information has been publicly released. And that silence speaks volumes. One of the first questions experts ask is, was the pressure applied from in front, from behind, or from the side? Each scenario reflects a different posture, a different moment, and a different level of intent. Another critical factor is handedness. In many cases, the dominant hand naturally creates more force on one side. So investigators will be studying whether the pressure leaned left, right, or centered, subtle clues that can narrow down a suspect far more than people realize. Then comes the question of method: was the pressure direct, as in manual force, or indirect, involving an object, fabric, or another item found in the cabin? Each method leaves a distinct signature, one that investigators can recognize even without revealing it to the public. What makes this especially troubling is the location: a cruise ship cabin, a closed space with no outsiders entering. Whoever applied that pressure was someone already inside. Someone close. Someone who had the opportunity and the time. The neck findings aren't just another detail. They are a roadmap, pointing toward how Anna's final moments unfolded, and toward the person who caused them. Toxicology results are often routine in sudden death investigations, but in Anna's case, the report has been withheld entirely. And that raises serious questions. On a cruise ship, where alcohol is everywhere, any trace of drinking by Anna, or by someone around her, would be extremely sensitive. It could shift the narrative, alter timelines, or contradict statements already given by family members. A tox report can reveal who was impaired, who wasn't, and whether any substances played a role in the moments before she was found. When authorities keep that information sealed, it usually means the findings are highly consequential to the case. Actual data. The hallway camera outside Anna's cabin captured a pattern investigators could not ignore. Across the critical hours of the night, only one teenager, her 16-year-old stepbrother, was seen entering and leaving the room. No strangers. No unknown adults. No additional siblings. Just him. And that creates a problem. According to the family, Anna was sharing the cabin with two younger boys, both stepbrothers. But the footage accounts for only one. The other boy, supposedly sleeping in the same room, never appears on camera. Not entering. Not exiting. Not even walking by. So where was he? In investigations, the absence of a person can be just as revealing as their presence. If he truly spent the night inside the room, the cameras should at least show him returning after dinner, or leaving the next morning. Yet, there is nothing. No confirmed timestamp. No visual proof. This gap forces investigators to consider several possibilities. Was he moved to another cabin? Did he sleep elsewhere that night? Or was the family's version of room assignments not accurate to begin with? In a closed room case, every remains in the room, and every remains missing from it, matters. And until the whereabouts of the second boy are clarified, the hallway camera footage remains one of the most unsettling mysteries in Anna's final hours. On a cruise ship, keycards are more than just room keys. They are digital witnesses. Every time a door opens, the system records it: the exact second, the card used, and the identity assigned to that card. It's one of the most reliable forms of evidence in closed-room investigations. And in Anna's case, the keycard logs may be the single most important dataset Carnival Horizon possesses. But none of it has been released. We don't know who opened the cabin door after Anna entered for the last time. We don't know how many times the door was accessed between 11:44 p.m. and 11:17 a.m. We don't know if anyone left, or if someone returned. And that silence from Carnival is unsettling. Normally, in accidental deaths, cruise lines are transparent. They share timelines, card scans, and door activity to quickly rule out foul play. But here, Carnival has withheld every detail, suggesting that what the logs show may contradict the family's statements or expose a timeline authorities are still piecing together. One of the biggest questions investigators will be asking is, Was there an attempt to erase or alter the logs? Cruise lines technically can't delete entries without leaving an administrative mark, but they can restrict what becomes public. And when a homicide is involved, they often lock the data behind federal investigation protocols. If a teenager entered or exited multiple times, if someone tried a card that wasn't assigned to the cabin, or if there were unusual entries around the time Anna's remains were concealed, those would be damning. Another question hides beneath the surface. Did the stepbrother's card show movement matching the CCTV footage? Or did the camera catch him at times the keycard didn't register? A mismatch between the two would expose attempts to leave the cabin unnoticed, or to re-enter after something happened. Even more disturbing is the possibility that Anna's own keycard was used after her death. That has happened in cruise ship tragedies before, where perpetrators used a victim's card to mask their movement. Carnival knows the truth. Their system knows every entry, every exit, every failed attempt. And the fact that none of this has been disclosed tells us one thing. The keycard logs don't just fill gaps in the story, they likely shatter it. Until Carnival releases those records, a digital witness remains trapped in silence, holding answers about what happened in the cabin, who opened the door, and who should have never been inside. Do you think the missing stepbrother's absence from the hallway footage is an innocent coincidence? Or the detail that changes everything? Let me know in the comments, what do you think happened during those missing hours? And why do you think only one person appeared on camera? From the moment investigators entered the cabin, one reality became impossible to ignore. This was a crime scene that existed entirely within the family. There were no signs of forced entry, no unfamiliar fingerprints, no unknown keycard scans, no hallway footage showing strangers approaching the door. Every piece of evidence pointed inward, not outward. That means whoever was responsible, or whoever witnessed what happened, came from the group of 3 people assigned to that room, Anna and her 2 stepbrothers. With Anna gone, attention naturally shifts to the remaining 2. But the cameras only show one boy moving in and out. The other is either missing from the footage, or was inside the cabin the entire time. Whichever version is true, both point to the same conclusion. All possible explanations exist within a closed circle of 3. In criminology, when an incident occurs in a locked, private space with restricted access, investigators focus almost exclusively on the people who were physically present, or expected to be present. Outsider theories collapse instantly. Random attackers disappear from consideration. This wasn't a break-in. This wasn't an attack by a stranger. This was something that happened behind a locked door, between people who knew each other, shared space with each other, and should have protected each other. The cabin wasn't just a room. It was a sealed environment, and the truth, whatever it is, was born inside that family circle. When the FBI boarded the Carnival Horizon, one of their very first actions was to seize every electronic device belonging to the teenagers and the adults connected to Anna. Phones, tablets, smartwatches, anything capable of storing messages or tracking activity. And in modern investigations, this step is more revealing than fingerprints or witness interviews. Why? Because digital footprints don't lie. Investigators will be looking closely at messages sent before Anna returned to the cabin. Snapchats, Instagram DMs, group chats, private threads, even deleted conversations can often be recovered if the phone hasn't been wiped. These messages can show arguments, plans, last conversations, or sudden shifts in behavior. They can expose tension within the cabin long before the tragedy unfolded. Then there's the timeline. Apps silently log online and offline activity. Every time someone opens Instagram, reads a DM, connects to ship Wi-Fi, or switches to airplane mode. If the stepbrother said he was asleep during critical hours, but his phone shows activity at 20:13 a.m., investigators will know. If someone deleted messages after Anna died, the timestamps will reveal it instantly. And perhaps most important, the final photo or message Anna ever sent. Victims often leave behind unintentional clues, something she posted, a selfie, a text to a friend saying she was heading back to the cabin. Even a short message like, BRB, can help reconstruct her last moments and determine whether she expected to be alone or expected someone to be waiting. Digital forensics can also uncover location data inside the ship, Bluetooth pings, Wi-Fi access points, and app tracking. These can show who was in the cabin, who wasn't, and who approached the door around the time everything happened. The devices hold the truth the family hasn't told. And whatever story the adults tried to present publicly, the FBI now has the silent, unalterable version, written in data, timestamps, and messages Anna never had the chance to finish. 16 years old suspect. One of the most frustrating aspects of the case is the silence surrounding the identity of the teenage stepbrother. Despite the severity of what happened, his name has never been released, and legally, it can't be. Under Florida's juvenile protection laws, any minor involved in a potential criminal investigation, whether as a suspect, witness, or person of interest, is shielded from public identification. The law is designed to protect children from long-term harm, even in cases where the public is demanding transparency. Because the Carnival Horizon departed from Miami, Florida statutes still apply, even though the ship was in international waters. Maritime law adds another layer of secrecy. Cruise ship incidents fall under a mix of federal jurisdiction and maritime regulations, both of which heavily restrict the release of information involving minors. This means neither the FBI nor Carnival can publicly name him, regardless of the circumstances. But there's one detail they couldn't fully hide. A custody court document, unrelated to the cruise, accidentally revealed family relationships, confirming the identities of the parents, the siblings, and the living arrangements before the trip. While it doesn't name the teen directly, it provides enough context to understand who was in the cabin and how the family structure fits together. Official channels may never release his name, but the paper trail around the family has already pointed investigators and the public closer to the truth than the law intended. At 16, emotions don't just run high, they swing violently. It's an age defined by identity, insecurity, and a desperate need for control. And when you place a teenager in a reblended family, on a confined cruise ship, sharing a cabin with step-siblings he barely knows, the psychological pressure becomes undeniable. Family counselors often call this the forced harmony effect. Parents want the trip to be peaceful. They want the kids to bond. But teenagers don't always feel the same way. A cruise, with its tight quarters and lack of personal space, can amplify underlying tensions that already existed long before the ship left port. Step-sibling dynamics are especially complicated. There's confusion about boundaries, shifting loyalties, and the silent resentment that forms when two families merge. One child may feel displaced, another may feel overshadowed. And in Anna's case, with her confidence, popularity, and outgoing personality, the contrast between her and a quieter, more withdrawn stepbrother could create friction that adults never noticed. Inside the cabin, these emotions become even sharper. 3 teenagers sharing a small room means shared noise, shared stress, shared frustrations. Privacy disappears. And without privacy, conflict grows faster. Jealousy is another factor investigators consider in cases like this. Not romantic jealousy, social jealousy. At 16, it's easy for a teen to feel ignored, undervalued, or compared. If the family favored Anna, praised her achievements, or expected look out for her, that imbalance can lead to resentment, even anger. Add the pressure of a family vacation, constant proximity, parent expectations, the need to get along, and small conflicts can escalate quickly. In closed-room incidents involving minors, psychological stress is often a more powerful trigger than physical opportunity. And on a ship where escape isn't possible and emotions have nowhere to go, the tension inside that cabin may have been building long before the door ever closed. When Anna's grandmother sat beside the 16-year-old during questioning, she expected fear, confusion, maybe even denial. What she didn't expect was the one sentence that instantly changed the tone of the investigation. "I don't remember anything." On the surface, it sounds like shock. A frightened teenager shutting down under pressure. But investigators know memory loss doesn't happen casually. It has patterns, causes, and in cases involving minors, it raises more questions than answers. Cruise ships are saturated with alcohol, bars on every deck, drinks are easily accessible. And even though minors can't legally purchase alcohol, access is never impossible, especially with adults present. If a 16-year-old consumed alcohol, even a small amount, it could impair judgment or memory formation. But here's the critical part: any underage drinking on a cruise places legal responsibility on the supervising adults. Parents, step-parents, and guardians can face serious consequences for allowing or ignoring it. So if alcohol was involved, admitting it would expose both the teen and the adults, giving everyone a motive to forget. Yes, shock can create memory gaps. Trauma can fragment timelines. But shock-induced amnesia doesn't erase an entire night. It usually blurs the peak emotional moment, not the hours leading up to it. Most importantly, shock doesn't selectively block only the moments that would answer investigators' questions. This is what concerns investigators the most. Selective memory loss often appears when a person feels cornered, especially a minor who fears punishment. They withhold details, claim confusion, or avoid specifics. It's a protective mechanism, not a neurological one. The grandmother's account, that he calmly said he couldn't remember, fits this pattern. There was no distress, no panic, just a practiced distance, the kind used when avoiding responsibility. Whether the memory gap is real or not, one fact remains: if a minor consumes alcohol, every supervising adult on that ship becomes accountable, legally and ethically. That alone could explain the contradictions, the silence, the missing details, and the strangely unified family narrative. A teenager forgetting a timeline is one thing. An entire family forgetting it with him is something else entirely. And in this case, the phrase, "I don't remember," might not be a symptom, it might be a strategy. One of the most disturbing elements of Anna's case isn't what the family said, it's what they didn't say. For an entire morning, no one reported Anna missing. Not her father, not her stepmother, not her grandparents, not even the two boys who shared a cabin with her. Hours passed, and still silence. In most cruise ship incidents, families panic if someone is gone for even 30 minutes. They call the cabin phone. They knock on doors. They alert staff. But here, the absence of concern feels louder than any alarm. So investigators are left with one troubling question: why didn't anyone look for her? If something happened overnight, an argument, a moment of panic, an accidental or intentional act, the instinct for some families is not to seek help, but to control the narrative. Pretending nothing wrong buys time. Not knocking on the door avoids discovering what's behind it. Not reporting her missing delays the point at which authorities become involved. Silence becomes a shield. A 16-year-old involved in a serious incident may fear punishment. A parent may fear legal consequences. Grandparents may fear public shame. When fear spreads through a group, the strategy becomes simple: don't ask, don't look, don't speak. But fear rarely produces complete inaction unless the adult suspect, or already know, what they might find. This is the theory many viewers and analysts whisper about. If the family believed the younger teen was involved, even indirectly, the instinct to protect him could overshadow their obligation to protect Anna. Failing to report her missing becomes a quiet, collective decision to shield the boy, to minimize exposure, or to buy time before the truth surfaces. Whatever the motive: fear, denial, loyalty, or concealment, the result was the same. Anna was lying under a bed for hours, while the people closest to her walked the ship, ate breakfast, and carried on as if nothing was wrong. In investigations, silence is rarely accidental. In this case, it may be the clearest clue of all. When Anna's father claimed she was the only one who went in and out of the cabin, he wasn't exaggerating. The hallway camera footage completely backs up his claim. During the crucial hours of the night, only one teenager, his 16-year-old half-brother, was recorded entering and exiting the cabin. No strangers, no staff, no other family members. In a closed-room environment, that detail is devastating. Because once you eliminate the possibility of outsiders, once you confirm the cabin door was never opened by anyone else, the investigation inevitably focuses in one direction. Every alternative theory collapses. Every explanation that points to an accident, unknown assailants, or medical mystery becomes harder to defend. The father's statement may have been an attempt to clarify, but what it really does is narrow it down to one person, the only individual with the access, opportunity, and timing documented. Camera footage doesn't lie. Keycard logs don't lie. And when both systems point to the same person, investigators no longer ask who might have entered the cabin. They start asking what happened after he entered. The silence from the FBI isn't accidental. It isn't hesitation. It's a strategy. From the moment Anna's remains were discovered, federal investigators took control of the case. Yet they have released almost no official details. No cause of death, no manner of death, no suspect names, no timeline. And in true crime investigations, that level of secrecy usually points to three powerful reasons. If the primary person of interest is under 18, federal law shields nearly every piece of identifying information. That includes name, behavior, testimony, and even the nature of suspected involvement. Federal agencies face strict penalties for exposing minors publicly, even in homicide cases. So the FBI stays silent, not because they lack answers, but because the suspect's age legally forces their silence. Cruise ships operate under a complicated mix of maritime law and federal jurisdiction. When a death occurs at sea, the investigative process slows down dramatically. Evidence must be collected carefully to avoid challenges. Witnesses must be interviewed in international waters or upon docking. And most importantly, anything released prematurely could compromise the case across multiple jurisdictions. Silence becomes the safest option. A tox report can redefine the entire timeline, revealing impairment, substances, or inconsistencies in witness statements. If alcohol was involved, it impacts both the minor and the adults supervising him. The FBI will not release conclusions until they have full toxicology, device forensics, keycard logs, digital timestamps, and a complete reconstruction of the cabin timeline. Any early public statement could contradict evolving evidence. In short, the silence doesn't mean the investigation is stalled. It means the FBI is protecting the case, protecting the evidence, and, by law, protecting the minor at the center of it. When agencies keep quiet this long, it usually means the truth is already known internally. They're just waiting for the moment they're legally allowed to say it. Why may there never be a sentence? Investigating a homicide on land is challenging. Investigating one on a cruise ship in international waters is exponentially harder. The Carnival Horizon was sailing under Bahamas registry, departing from Miami, carrying U.S. citizens, and operating in international jurisdiction when Anna died. That creates a legal triangle: Bahamas law, U.S. federal law, and maritime, all overlapping, all conflicting. Before the FBI can even begin treating this as a criminal case, they must establish jurisdiction. Did the act occur in U.S. waters? Did it involve a U.S. victim or suspect? Did it violate international maritime statutes? Each answer to such agency leads, which evidence is admissible, and which charges are possible. But the hardest part is proving intent. On land, investigators have access to neighbors, street cameras, forensics labs, and rapid response teams. On a ship, evidence degrades quickly, timelines blur, and witness accounts become unreliable as passengers scatter across ports. Cabin spaces are small, movements are unmonitored, and digital data is limited to ship-operated systems. For the FBI to move forward, they must demonstrate that what happened wasn't a medical event, but a deliberate act. That requires airtight reconstruction, keycard logs, camera timestamps, device forensics, tox results, all perfectly aligned. A homicide at sea isn't just a crime. It's a legal puzzle with pieces drifting across borders. When the primary suspect in a homicide is a minor, the justice system transforms. The transparency the public expects in a case this horrific simply disappears, because legally, it has to. If the 16-year-old stepbrother is ever formally identified as a suspect, the entire process will move into a protected legal world where everything happens behind closed doors. Juvenile defendants in the United States are shielded by some of the strongest privacy laws in the country. Their names cannot be released, not by police, not by prosecutors, not by the court. Even the FBI must protect their identity. In Florida, these protections are even stricter. This means the public may never hear his name, even if he is found responsible. If the case proceeds in juvenile court, the hearings are completely sealed. No press, no transcripts, no public documentation. The only people allowed inside are family members, attorneys, and court officials. Any outcome, probation, treatment, confinement, would remain confidential. To the outside world, it would look like the case simply vanished. Unlike high-profile adult trials, juvenile hearings cannot be filmed. There will be no televised courtroom, no testimonies for the public to analyze, no cross-examination clips circulating online. Every critical detail, from the teen's statements to the forensic evidence presented, would be hidden from public view. Even the reasoning behind the court's decision would remain sealed. This is the outcome many viewers fear the most. If the FBI concludes that a minor was responsible, and the case moves through the juvenile system, the public may never know what truly happened inside the cabin, what the toxicology showed, what the keycard logs revealed, what the stepbrother told investigators, or why the family remained silent. The investigation would still exist. The accountability would still exist. But the transparency would not. In juvenile cases, the priority shifts from public justice to protecting the future of the minor, even in situations where the victim was also a child, or, in Anna's case, a vulnerable teenager trapped in a confined space. And so the unsettling truth is this: even if the FBI solves the case completely, the world may only see a fraction of it. Because when the suspect is under 18, the justice system closes its doors, and the answers stay locked inside. When a case involves a minor, especially one connected to a closed cabin at sea, the possible legal outcomes become far more complex and often far less satisfying for the public. Instead of a clear, open courtroom process, what follows is typically a quiet sequence of sealed hearings, private negotiations, and decisions made behind doors the public can't enter. Here are the outcomes experts believe are most likely. If authorities determine that the teen bears responsibility, the case may enter the juvenile system. And unlike the adult system, the focus isn't long-term punishment, it's rehabilitation. The most severe outcome available is placement in a youth facility for up to 3 years, regardless of the gravity of the incident. There would be no public trial, no release of evidence, and no disclosure of the final ruling. Once the minor turns 18 or 21, depending on the state records, can be sealed or even expunged. To the outside world, it can feel like the case simply evaporated. Another extremely likely outcome is a private plea agreement between the teen's attorneys and prosecutors. These deals usually happen when evidence is strong but sensitive, the suspect is underage, and both sides want to avoid a long legal battle. The agreement may involve counseling, supervision, restricted movement, or time in a youth program. But the public would hear none of it. A sealed plea leaves no public documents, no media statements, and no explanation to the community. Some maritime juvenile cases are handled not through the criminal system, but through family court, where the focus shifts to household dynamics, supervision failures, and safety plans. This process does not determine guilt in the way criminal courts do, is entirely closed, and results in protective measures rather than traditional sentencing. Family court can require therapy, guardian supervision, or long-term monitoring, but again, none of this becomes public record. This is one of the most controversial possibilities. Misadventure. Ruling essentially states that the passing resulted from an unexpected event without clear intention. Cruise lines often favor this conclusion because it reduces legal exposure and civil liability. If investigators cannot publicly establish deliberate action, the case may be labeled as a tragic outcome of unforeseen circumstances, even if the private evidence suggests a more complicated truth. The final possibility is the most ambiguous and the one families dread. An undetermined classification means the evidence is incomplete, the timelines conflict, and the circumstances cannot be clearly resolved. This ruling closes the case without answering the questions the public and Anna's supporters have been asking since day one. No charges. No resolution. Just an empty space in the record. In the end, every potential outcome leads to the same unsettling reality. The public may never learn what truly happened inside that cabin. And the legal system, bound by juvenile protection laws and maritime complexity, may close the chapter long before the world feels the story has even begun. In any closed-room tragedy, investigators look first at the physical evidence. But very quickly, attention shifts to something even more revealing: the words of the people closest to the victim. In Anna's case, the family statements should have clarified what happened. Instead, they created a maze of contradictions that has only deepened public suspicion. From the beginning, each branch of the family seemed to offer a different narrative. Anna's father publicly emphasized that only one teenager was seen entering and exiting the cabin, a statement supported by CCTV footage. His version implies he wants clarity, transparency, and a direct path toward the truth. But the stepmother's account introduces a different tone, one that appears protective or cautious. Certain details she shared in interviews conflict with her husband's statements. When Anna left dinner, how she felt, and whether the boys were actually in the cabin that night. These discrepancies may seem small, but in a timeline this fragile, they matter. They shape the entire understanding of the final hours. Then there are the grandparents, whose statements have shifted more dramatically than anyone else's. At first, they described the siblings as close, almost inseparable. Later, they distanced themselves from that version. They initially suggested Anna wasn't feeling well, only to later reference casino footage showing her active and cheerful. Most startling of all was the grandmother's recounting that the teen said he doesn't remember anything, a claim that raised more questions than answers. These inconsistencies matter because they reveal a family divided, not just by grief, but by conflicting loyalties. Who is each person trying to protect? The father appears to lean toward openness. The stepmother's version seems more guarded. The grandparents' shifting story suggests uncertainty or pressure from within the family dynamic. When relatives cannot agree on basic facts, investigators pay attention. Not because contradictions automatically mean guilt, but because they often signal competing narratives inside the household. In blended families, alliances form quietly. A parent may shield their biological child. A step-parent may try to minimize exposure. Grandparents may attempt to reconcile both sides while unintentionally revealing more than they intend. What emerges is not one feigned voice, but a fractured group, each piece pulling in its own direction. And in cases like this, truth rarely survives internal division. The more their stories diverge, the more the spotlight tightens, not on strangers, not on outsiders, but on the dynamics within that cabin and within that family. In every tragedy, there is the moment when a life is taken, and then there is the moment when the truth about that life begins to disappear. For Anna, those two moments feel painfully connected. The first took place inside a small cruise ship cabin, behind a locked door, during a night no one in her family seems able, or willing, to explain. The second began the next morning, when silence closed in, statements diverged, and the systems meant to protect victims instead shielded the people around her. The first ending was physical. Her remains were found hidden, covered, placed where no one would immediately see her. It was an act that suggested panic, concealment, or fear, but not compassion. Someone had made the decision to hide her instead of helping her. Someone chose delay over honesty. That moment marked the end of Anna's life. But what happened next became the second ending. One far quieter, and in many ways, far more haunting. It began with the family's contradictions. Different versions of dinner, different accounts of where the boys slept, different descriptions of Anna's final hours. Every shift in the story created more distance between Anna and the truth. Instead of clarity, there was confusion. Instead of urgency, there was silence. Instead of accountability, there were explanations that contradicted the evidence. Then came the system's juvenile protections, maritime rules, sealed records, withheld reports. Each layer, while built to protect minors, also created a barrier against transparency. The toxicology findings, the cabin keycard data, the internal interviews, none of it has been released. Even if investigators piece together exactly what happened, the public may never hear the conclusion. Legally, the outcome could remain hidden indefinitely. And so, slowly, the truth begins to suffocate beneath silence. When a family refuses to speak clearly, when agencies cannot disclose details, when the only minor present is legally shielded, a different kind of harm takes shape, not to Anna's remains, but to her story. Because in the absence of answers, a narrative forms that centers protection around everyone except the girl who lost her life. The people with the most knowledge cannot be named. The people with the most questions cannot get answers. And the person at the center of it all, the one whose future ended on November 7, has no voice in what comes next. That is the second ending. The moment when a victim's truth is covered, minimized, or dissolved into legal shadows. Anna deserved clarity. She deserved a full investigation the world could see. She deserved a family whose stories aligned with the facts. Instead, she enters the rare category of cases where the truth may exist, but may never be spoken. Where the timeline is known, but sealed. Where the final moments are understood, but unpublished. And that is why people say Anna was lost twice. Once in that cabin, and once in the silence that followed. Answers. Right now, I want to pause the investigation and turn directly to you, the viewers, the investigators, the people who've been following every detail of this case with the same intensity that professionals bring into an interview room. There are three questions at the heart of this mystery. Three questions that determine everything. And your perspective might reveal patterns or angles that no one else has considered yet. Let's break them down. This is more than a timeline detail. It's the key to understanding the entire night. We know she was alive when she returned to the cabin around 11:44 p.m. on November 6th. We also know that by 11:17 a.m. the next morning, she was already gone. But the crucial question is, at what point during that window did everything change? If it happened shortly after she entered the room on the night of the 6th, that suggests immediate conflict, something waiting inside the cabin that escalated quickly. If it happened in the early morning hours, that implies a longer interaction, perhaps an argument, maybe tension building over time. The timing also affects who was awake, Who was present, who was moving around the ship, and who had the opportunity. And because the family didn't check on her the next morning, the timeline is murky, maybe intentionally so. What do you think? Was the crucial moment right after she returned to the cabin, or do you believe it happened hours later, closer to dawn? Drop your theory in the comments and explain why. This is one of the most mysterious elements of the case, and one that investigators have not publicly explained. Her clothing wasn't on her, wasn't mentioned in reports, and hasn't been publicly identified anywhere inside the cabin. In forensic investigations, clothing can reveal whether someone removed it voluntarily, whether someone else removed it, whether any marks or signs were being concealed, whether there was movement, struggle, or panic, and who handled the items based on fibers, prints, and DNA. The fact that authorities have kept this detail completely sealed tells us one thing: whatever they found, or didn't find, is extremely important. So the question becomes, where do you think her clothing is? Hidden? Taken? Thrown somewhere in the cabin? Removed earlier in the night? Something else? Your theories could open up entirely new angles. This is the part that has stunned investigators and viewers alike. The family insists two boys shared the cabin with Anna, but the hallway camera shows only one of them moving in and out. The other stepbrother is nowhere on the footage. There are only a few possible explanations. He slept somewhere else, which contradicts the family's statements. He intentionally avoided the room during the crucial hours. He was inside the cabin the entire time and never left. The family's version of who slept where simply isn't accurate. Each possibility opens an entirely different investigative path. If only one boy was moving around the cabin all night, the timeline narrows dramatically. If the second boy was inside the room and never appeared on camera, then his testimony, or silence, becomes even more crucial. Why do you think only one teen shows up on camera? Was the second boy moved to another room? Did he stay inside the cabin all night? Or was the family story about room assignments not accurate from the beginning? Now, we move deeper into the psychological, behavioral, and emotional decisions that happened after Anna stopped appearing on camera. These next 4 questions are some of the most haunting in the entire case. And your insight here could help uncover motives that investigators have never publicly discussed. This is one of the biggest red flags. A teenage girl supposedly not feeling well leaves dinner early. She doesn't return to activities. She doesn't come back to talk to her parents. And yet no one checks on her. Not that night, not at midnight, not at 2 a.m. Why? Was it indifference? Fear? A silent agreement to avoid the cabin? Or did someone already know she would not be coming out? What do you think? Was their silence accidental or intentional? Hiding someone takes time. It takes effort. It takes awareness. This is never the reaction of someone facing a medical emergency. It is the reaction of someone who wants to delay discovery, someone panicking, someone afraid of consequences, or someone trying to create distance between themselves and what happened. There is also the psychological side. People who hide a person often experience guilt, fear, or shock. But it also signals one more thing: this was not an accident. Why do I think the remains were placed under the bed? To delay detection. To avoid being caught in the room. To make the morning look normal. A life jacket is not a natural object to grab. It's not on the bed. It's not used as a blanket. Someone had to take it out intentionally. Was it to cover certain areas? To mask visible signs that would raise questions? To make the scene look less alarming to anyone entering the room? Or was it simply panic, the closest thing available? What's your theory? Panic, purpose, or an attempt to obscure something investigators haven't revealed? At first, Anna wasn't feeling well. Then she went to bed early. Then she was in the casino, having fun. At first, the siblings were very close. Then suddenly they barely talked. At first, both boys were said to be in the cabin. Then only one appears on camera. When statements shift, investigators look for motives behind the rewrite. Is it confusing? Fear? Pressure within the family? Or a coordinated attempt to protect someone? Why do you think their stories changed? Was it panic? Was it guilt? Or was it something more intentional? As the investigation deepens, we reach a point where the evidence inside the cabin is no longer the only mystery. What surrounds the case, the silence, the legal barriers, the conflicting voices, becomes just as important as what happened between those 4 walls. And so we enter the final 3 questions, the ones that dictate whether the truth ever reaches daylight, or whether it remains trapped at sea forever. The first question is one many viewers have already asked: why is the media raising alarms, while the FBI remains completely silent? News outlets have demanded answers about the cause of death, the missing timeline, the shifting accounts from family members. Reporters have criticized the lack of transparency. But the FBI has spoken almost not at all. In cases involving adults, silence usually means uncertainty. But when a minor is at the center of the investigation, silence becomes mandatory. Federal law shields any underage subject, whether a witness or a person of interest, and this case took place under the added weight of maritime regulations. Everything that happens on a ship in international waters is handled through layers of federal oversight, cross-jurisdictional rules, and sealed protocols. The public may see silence as hesitation, but investigators may see it as protection of evidence, of the case, or of someone involved. And so the question falls to you: is the FBI withholding information because the truth is too sensitive, or because the law prevents them from saying more? That leads directly into the second question: why has no one been arrested, even after the death was officially ruled a homicide? The word itself suggests clarity, intent, and a suspect. But in reality, homicide is a classification, not an accusation. When the person linked to the timeline is under 18, the justice system transforms entirely. Juvenile cases are sealed. Hearings are closed. Records disappear from public view. Even if investigators have a strong theory, they cannot make a public arrest in the way people expect. They may be waiting for toxicology. They may be preparing a private petition for juvenile court. Or the case may be moving forward quietly, in ways the public will never see. In maritime juvenile cases, progress often looks like stillness. For the viewer, that raises an uncomfortable question: do you believe no arrest has been made because there isn't enough evidence? Or because the legal system is dealing with a minor behind closed doors? And finally, the most emotional question of all: can justice truly reach a ship in the middle of the ocean? Cruise ship cases are some of the most difficult in the world. Multiple jurisdictions overlap. Corporate interests influence communication. International laws restrict what can be shared. And when you add juvenile protections, the truth sinks even deeper beneath the surface. Some cases never reach a courtroom. Some remain in sealed files forever. Others result in outcomes the public never hears about. For Anna, justice is not only about accountability, it is also about transparency, clarity, and the right for the community to understand what happened. But at sea, truth often drifts away long before the ship returns to port. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Why is the FBI silent? Why has no one been arrested? And do you believe justice can ever fully emerge from a crime that took place between borders, laws, and ocean currents? Your thoughts may shape the next chapter of this investigation. All persons are presumed innocent until proven guilty.